So if you wanted to build an entire universe, like from absolute scratch, what kind of tools do you think you'd need?
Oh, man. I mean, you'd probably need, like, unimaginable amounts of raw materials, right?
Yeah.
Just massive industrial scale energy.
Yeah, exactly. When we try to picture that ultimate beginning of everything, human imagination usually defaults to these just chaotic, violent images.
Hmm.
We picture superheated matter exploding,
Hmm.
or, primordial chemical soups just slowly bubbling over billions of years.
Yeah, or even if you look back at ancient history, like the myths our ancestors wrote, it's always this literal cosmic battleground.
Oh, totally. Rival gods just violently ripping each other apart.
Right, using the severed pieces of their enemies to, like, forge the sky and the dirt.
It's wild. But the assumption is always that creating reality requires, well, force. It requires friction.
And stuff, pre-existing stuff.
Yes. But what if, and this is what we're getting into today, what if the only tool required was a vocal cord?
That is such a wild concept.
Right. What if the universe isn't a structure that was built, or just some accident, but a sentence that was spoken?
I mean, that premise completely short circuits how we are trained to think about existence.
It really does.
If reality is fundamentally a spoken phenomenon, it forces you to reevaluate, well, everything. The stars, the dirt under your fingernails, the reflection in the mirror.
Because you aren't just standing on a random rock anymore.
Exactly. You are standing inside an articulated thought.
And exploring that exact paradigm shift is our mission for this deep dive. Today, we're digging into this brilliant piece of theological and historical analysis by Chris R. Velazquez.
It's called Creation by Divine Command.
Yeah, that's the one. We had this really dense, incredibly rich article from him. And alongside it, he provided this 12-stage infographic.
Which is super helpful, by the way.
Oh, it's a lifesaver.
Uh-huh.
It takes that one central premise that God spoke the universe into existence and maps out the entire grand narrative of the biblical texts.
From before time began all the way to the end of history.
Right. And the stakes of this are massive for you listening right now, whether you're, someone who reads heavy theology on the weekends, or you're just driving to work wondering what the point of all this daily grind actually is.
Yeah, because according to the source material, the idea of a spoken universe changes how you view meaning, morality, and even your own physical body.
So let's just jump right in. Where does Velazquez start us off?
Well, the central thesis he presents, which I think is vital to grasp right away, is about the book of Genesis. When it opens with that famous phrase, "and God said," Velazquez argues that this isn't just some poetic flourish.
It's like it's not just an ancient writer trying to be dramatic.
Exactly. He says it is the foundational mechanical truth of the entire worldview.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because to understand why that matters, we have to look at the actual mechanism of creation he describes, right?
Because in any discipline, how a thing is made tells you pretty much everything about the maker.
And the function of the thing itself.
Yes. So Velazquez highlights this very deliberate rhythm in Genesis 1. It acts almost like a heartbeat for the chapter.
And God said.
Yeah.
And it was so. And God saw that it was good.
Exactly. It just repeats. And what's fascinating here is the glaring absence of effort.
Oh, yeah. There's no struggle at all.
None. There is no negotiation with the elements, which is a radical departure from the cultural context of that time.
Like the ancient Near Eastern myths you mentioned earlier.
Right, like the Enuma Elish in Babylon. In those stories, the gods are essentially celestial mechanics. They take raw materials that already exist, like the chaotic waters of the sea, and they try to wrestle them into submission.
It's violent, exhausting work.
Totally. The gods literally get tired.
Nah.
But Velazquez emphasizes that the God of Genesis is not a craftsman sweeping up cosmic debris. He isn't trying to carve a sculpture out of, like, stubborn stone.
He creates reality entirely by commanding it to exist.
Yes, the word itself is the mechanism.
Wait, I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around the physics of this. Let's say a human builder is hired to construct a house. They are fundamentally limited by their materials, right? They have to buy timber and wood splinters. They buy bricks, and bricks crumble.
We have to negotiate with the reality of the stuff they're working with.
Exactly. But this text claims the creator needs zero raw materials. There is no pre-existing timber.
The spoken word itself becomes the raw material.
That is just, it's mind-bending.
The philosophical term Velazquez uses for this is dependent existence. The text begins, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth."
Right.
He points out that this seemingly simple sentence places the creator completely outside of time, space, and matter.
Because if you create the system, you aren't bound by the rules of the system.
Exactly. Therefore, the universe doesn't have its own independent battery pack. It is entirely contingent. It only exists because the speaker is actively sustaining the sentence.
Wow. So it doesn't originate itself. It relies entirely on the breath of the speaker.
Yes.
But how does that move from just a vague, mystical idea into actual ordered reality? Because the universe we observe isn't just a generic soup of stuff.
Right, we have gravity, distinct species, thermodynamics.
Yeah. It's highly specific.
And that is exactly what the source highlights next. The divine speech isn't just a volume knob turning up the existence of matter. It is deeply organizational.
Oh, interesting.
The author notes how the creator distinguishes, names, and assigns function. He speaks light and separates it from darkness. He speaks the land and sets its boundary against the sea.
So by speaking things into existence, he's establishing their specific identity.
And their boundaries. Velazquez describes the resulting universe not as a lucky accident of physics, but as an intricately ordered theater for God's glory.
And Velazquez makes it clear that this isn't just one isolated ancient poem that the rest of the Bible ignores, right?
Oh, absolutely not. He traces this architecture of the spoken word through the entire scriptural library.
Like Psalm 33.
Yes, which explicitly says the heavens were made by the word of the Lord. And Hebrews 11, which argues that the visible universe wasn't made out of visible things, but by the command of God.
The entire library agrees on this one fundamental physics equation. God speaks, and reality physically obeys.
Which honestly forces us into a very difficult philosophical corner.
How so?
Because if God creates everything entirely from nothing using only speech, it drastically alters the power dynamic. It changes who God is relative to the universe, and it puts human beings in a very specific, sometimes uncomfortable position.
Yeah, the author spends a significant amount of time on this. He calls it the metaphysics of divine speech.
Right.
And he roots it in this concept of God's absolute transcendence and freedom. Because God spoke everything into existence out of a void, he is not a piece of the universe.
Which is a common misconception.
Huge misconception. I think a lot of times people imagine God as just the biggest, most powerful being inside the system.
Like a giant invisible CEO sitting at the top of the cosmic org chart.
Exactly. But this analysis says he's completely outside the building.
Yes. The theological concept Velazquez highlights is that God is complete in himself. The author notes that the triune God did not need companionship.
He wasn't, like, lonely before time began.
Right. He didn't lack power or joy or purpose. Therefore, the creation of the universe wasn't some act of desperate necessity to fill an inner void.
Velazquez describes it as an overflow, right?
A completely free, gracious act of divine will.
I think to really grasp how unique that is, we have to look at the massive gap between human speech and this concept of divine speech.
There are fundamentally different categories.
Yeah. When you or I use words, our language is purely descriptive. Like if I sit here and say the words cup of coffee,
Yeah.
I'm just applying a label to a ceramic object that already exists.
Your words don't summon the coffee from thin air.
I really wish they did, but no.
Sadly, no.
But according to Velazquez, divine speech is generative. It doesn't describe an existing reality. It executes it.
It is effective in the most literal sense of the word. Human speech fails all the time. We make promises we can't keep. We describe things inaccurately.
Right.
But the source insists that the creator's word is living and active. It accomplishes exactly what it sets out to do.
And Velazquez connects this generative power directly to human authority, doesn't he?
He does. Because we did not generate the universe, we are forced to receive reality as a given. We don't get to invent the baseline rules of existence.
I like to picture it like a programmer writing code for a massive software system.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Like if I say I want the background of this website to be blue,
Yeah.
I'm just expressing a desire. I'm describing a preference.
Right.
But when the lead programmer opens the terminal and types the actual hex codes into the source code, that language is entirely different.
The code doesn't describe the blue screen.
The language is the blue screen. It executes the reality. And if I am just a digital avatar running around inside that software, I can't just loudly declare that the sky is now neon green.
Because you don't have access to the source code.
Exactly. I don't have the terminal.
That is a highly accurate way to frame what Velazquez is arguing, and it brings us right to the tension he highlights regarding human pride.
This is where the text violently collides with modern psychology.
He really does.
Because if you look at the dominant cultural mantras today, they are entirely centered on radical autonomy.
Create your own reality.
Yes. Or, I am speaking my truth into the universe. We treat our own desires and words as if they have generative, universe-altering power.
But if Colossus is right, and the universe is already a spoken reality generated by a transcendent creator, then trying to independently redefine reality isn't just arrogant.
It's delusional.
Velazquez uses a very stark phrase for this. He argues that human pride is not merely a moral failing. He calls it a metaphysical lie.
Wow. Metaphysical lie.
Because if God alone possesses the power to create from nothing, then any power a human being possesses is strictly derivative. It is borrowed capital.
You're using borrowed vocal cords.
Towered by borrowed autocracy.
Standing on borrowed gravity.
Yeah.
Just to declare your independence from the lender.
Exactly. When you put it like that, the posture of speaking my truth seems almost absurd.
It really does.
Because you are a creature, not the creator. And Velazquez points out that the only logically sound response to realizing your power is completely derivative is humility.
A posture of obedience.
And ultimately, wonder. Wonder that you were invited into the system at all.
It totally strips away the illusion that we're the authors of this story. We are characters in a narrative that is currently being spoken by someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But, recognizing that we are physical creatures inside this spoken system leads to a profound pivot in the source material.
It forces us to address how we actually view this physical stuff we're made of.
Right. Velazquez dedicates a crucial section to the intrinsic goodness of matter.
If the physical world, the dirt, the water, human tissue, was deliberately spoken into existence by a perfect creator, it cannot be inherently corrupt or evil.
This is huge. Because I feel like so much of what we consider spirituality today is fundamentally anti-physical.
Oh, completely.
There's this pervasive assumption that the physical world is, kind of gross, or base, or unevolved. We have this dichotomy where spirit equals pure and good, and body equals dirty and bad.
You see it in ancient philosophies, but also in modern wellness culture.
Yes. This constant desire to transcend the physical body, to escape the messy reality of eating and sleeping and working, and ascend to some, purely energetic plane of enlightenment.
Well, Velazquez firmly argues that the book of Genesis utterly rejects that dichotomy.
He points out that the repeated refrain of "it was good" isn't just a decorative adjective.
It is a massive moral and theological declaration. The physical world is not a dirty prison cell that human souls are trapped inside, waiting for a spiritual jailbreak.
Which means the guilt someone might feel when they take a really restorative nap.
Or enjoy a beautifully cooked meal.
Right. The idea that truly spiritual people shouldn't care about a good meal or an incredible piece of physical art, this text says that instinct is actually backward.
It's almost a form of rebellion against the design.
Exactly.
Velazquez highlights Genesis 1, specifically verses 26 through 28, to show that human embodiment is central to the design.
The physical act of working, of planting a garden, of tending to animals.
It isn't a punishment for being unspiritual. It is the original spoken vocation of humanity.
It honors the physical world as God's handiwork. But Velazquez takes this a step further and introduces a concept that, I'm not going to lie, I had to read 3 times to fully grasp.
The Christological architecture?
Yes. He connects this goodness of the physical world directly to the Christological architecture of the universe. And I'm going to need you to unpack that because that sounds incredibly dense. What is the actual mechanism there?
It is a heavy term, but the concept is actually quite elegant. Velazquez points out that in the New Testament, texts like John 1, Colossians 1, and Hebrews 1, the eternal Son, Jesus, is explicitly identified as the active agent of creation.
Okay.
The scriptures say that all things were made through him and for him.
So when you say architecture, we're just talking about like a blueprint.
No, think about it in terms of actual building construction. If you look at a massive cathedral, you have load-bearing walls and central pillars.
Right.
If you pull the central pillar out, the entire structure collapses into dust.
Oh, wow.
Velazquez is arguing that the text presents Christ not merely as a historical figure who shows up late in the story to teach morality.
He's the load-bearing pillar of the physical universe.
Exactly. The universe has a Christological architecture because the physical matter is literally held together by his sustaining word.
So to read the creation account in Genesis, without seeing the presence of the eternal Son, the Word, who eventually takes on physical flesh, is to totally miss the foundational physics of how the universe operates.
That is the specific warning the author gives. He cautions against separating the Father's work of creation from the Son.
It's not just anthropocentric centered around humans.
No, it is Christ-centered. The physical matter exists to display his glory.
Okay, so we have this incredibly intricate, perfectly ordered, physically good system held together by the source code of divine speech. But if you look out the window for 5 seconds, you realize this system is currently experiencing a massive amount of chaos.
A staggering amount, yeah.
And this is where the 12-stage infographic provided by Velazquez becomes essential. Because this spoken creation isn't a static museum exhibit, it's the opening scene of a cosmic drama.
It's a highly dynamic timeline. The infographic traces the echo of that original spoken word through 12 distinct stages of biblical history.
Let's look at the first half of this grand narrative. It moves from the concept of eternity down through the tragedy of exile.
So stages 1 and 2 are exactly what we've been unpacking. Eternity and creation.
God exists before all things, speaks the physical world into being, let there be light, and the code executes perfectly.
But then we slam into stage 3, the fall.
And Velazquez frames Genesis 3 in a way that completely shifted my understanding of what actually happened in the Garden of Eden.
You're talking about his analysis of the serpent's strategy.
Yes. Because if you think about it, if an enemy wanted to destroy a perfectly ordered universe built by an all-powerful creator, you'd expect a frontal assault.
A massive, violent cosmic war.
Right. But the serpent doesn't bring an army. He brings a question mark.
It's brilliant.
The very first recorded words of the serpent are a linguistic trick. Did God actually say?
It's a surgical strike. Velazquez defines the fall not primarily as breaking a random rule, but as a crisis of revelation.
A crisis of revelation.
The enemy knows he cannot overpower the creator's force, so he targets the mechanism of creation itself, the spoken word.
He doesn't start by screaming that God doesn't exist.
No, he subtly introduces distrust regarding the integrity of the divine speech.
Now, hold on. I have to push back here.
Okay.
Because if God's word is the ultimate reality, and he creates this flawlessly ordered system with load-bearing Christological architecture, why does a linguistic trick from a snake break it so easily?
It's a valid question.
It sounds like a pretty fragile system if one question mark can fracture reality. How does doubting a sentence cause the physical world to fall apart?
That is the exact tension the text wants you to feel. The fragility isn't in the physics of the universe.
Okay.
The fragility is in the relational trust of the human agents who were given dominion over it.
Oh, because humanity was given the vocation to steward the earth.
Right. But that stewardship requires operating in alignment with reality, meaning in alignment with what the Creator has spoken.
So when the human creature decides to distrust the word,
And attempts to autonomously redefine what is good and what is evil, they are essentially trying to rewrite the source code without access to the terminal.
and the result isn't a cool new reality.
No, the result is a catastrophic system error.
Yeah.
The creation fractures because the creature meant to steward it has rebelled against the physics of how it operates.
So the fall is the human being choosing a metaphysical lie over the foundational truth.
Precisely.
And the immediate result of that system error is chaos, death, and separation.
Yeah.
So what is the creator's response? Because, I mean, if I build a perfect software program and the user immediately corrupted it with a virus, my instinct would be to delete the program and start over.
Naturally. But that leads us to stage 4, covenant.
God does not abandon the corrupted system.
He answers the brokenness not by walking away, but by speaking again.
He speaks promises to Abraham. He speaks the law to Moses.
He makes unbreakable oaths. The same creator who spoke the world into existence now uses his word to bind himself to the fractured world in order to redeem it.
Which moves us right into stage 5, redemption. And Velazquez makes a point here that I think shatters a lot of popular misconceptions.
About the cross.
Yeah. He notes that the cross was not a desperate plan B. It wasn't God scrambling to fix a mistake because the humans ruined plan A.
The author cites Acts chapter 2, verse 23, to establish that redemption was purposed in the mind of God before the foundation of the world was even spoken.
The cross was always part of the architecture.
And Velazquez draws this profound parallel regarding the mechanism of that redemption. He argues that the exact same divine word that commanded "let there be light" is the exact same generative word that recreates dead human hearts.
Like the story of Jesus standing outside the tomb of his friend.
The raising of Lazarus.
Yes. Jesus doesn't perform a magic ritual. He simply uses his vocal cords and issues a command. Lazarus, come out.
It is the Creator's voice executing life where there was only death.
Okay, so the redemption is secured. But that brings us to stages 6 and 7, kingdom and exile.
This is where the timeline overlaps with our actual daily lives.
Right, because the text says the risen Christ currently reigns, and his kingdom is advancing, but simultaneously, the physical world is still groaning.
It remains in a state of tension and brokenness.
Velazquez uses the word exile to describe this state. But how does this ancient concept of exile map onto the psychology of a person just, driving to work on a Tuesday? We don't usually walk around thinking, I'm an exiled being.
We might not use the word, but Velazquez argues we feel the reality of it every single day.
How so?
Exile is the psychological and physical experience of living in a creation that is under a curse. It is the deep-seated friction you experience.
Oh, wow.
When you face an aggressive illness, when a close relationship violently fractures, when your work feels utterly meaningless.
Or when you just have that quiet, persistent anxiety at 2 a.m. that things are simply not as they should be.
That is the human condition experiencing exile. It is the pain of living in a world that is currently alienated from the unbroken, harmonious voice of its creator.
So exile is the friction of a corrupted system.
Exactly.
But because redemption was plan A, the source insists that the exile is not permanent.
The creator is deeply committed to resolving the tension.
Which brings us to the climax of this entire cosmic drama. Looking at the second half of the infographic, moving from restoration all the way to new creation.
Velazquez shows us that the story is going to end in the exact same manner that it began.
With a spoken word.
Yes. Stage 8 is restoration. Throughout the Old Testament, the prophets don't just promise that God is going to forgive people and whisk their souls away.
Right.
They promise that God is going to renew the earth. They use creation language deserts, suddenly blooming with water, valleys of dry bones being spoken back into living bodies.
And this intense hope of physical restoration leads directly to stage 9. The Messiah.
This is where the load-bearing pillar steps into the room.
Jesus. John 1:14 says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Velazquez calls this the absolute center of Christian wonder.
Going back to our earlier analogy, this is the lead programmer physically entering the digital simulation he coded.
The creator deliberately becomes a creature, without ever shedding his identity or authority as the creator.
He steps into the broken system to absorb the corruption.
And through that act, he initiates stage 10. The church.
Which Velazquez describes as a new people being called out of spiritual darkness.
And he notes that this is a direct, deliberate echo of day 1 of creation when God called physical light to shine out of the dark.
It's the same mechanism applied to human beings.
Which leads inevitably to stage 11, judgment.
Now, judgment is a concept that makes modern audiences incredibly uncomfortable. It feels, harsh.
It does, but Velazquez frames it very differently here. He argues that judgment is simply the necessary confirmation that the universe is fundamentally morally ordered.
Okay, walk me through that logically.
Well, if the God who speaks creation into existence is perfectly good, and his word establishes the objective boundaries of reality, then he must eventually speak accountability into the system.
Right, otherwise the order means nothing.
Exactly. Judgment in this framework is not a petty tyrant throwing a tantrum. It is the public final triumph of the Creator King, where all chaos, all rebellion, and all evil are definitively subdued by his command.
And the system is finally purged of the virus.
Yes. And that purge clears the way for the grand finale, stage 12, new creation and eternity.
Drawn heavily from Revelation 21 and 22.
And Velazquez issues a massive warning here about a catastrophic misunderstanding that many people have about the end of the world.
Right, because the source explicitly argues that the endgame is not about the annihilation of planet Earth.
It is about its transfiguration.
The quote from Revelation is the Creator sitting on the throne and declaring, "Behold, I am making all things new."
Notice the phrasing Velazquez points out. The Creator does not say, "Behold, I am making all new things."
Oh. That's a huge distinction.
He is not throwing the earth into a cosmic incinerator and starting over with a brand new batch of matter.
He is taking the existing, fractured, exiled creation and renewing it completely.
God dwells with his people forever, not in a foggy spiritual ether, but in a perfected physical cosmos.
This directly addresses what Velazquez calls the danger of losing eschatological hope.
Because if you ask the average person on the street what the Christian view of heaven is, they will describe a cartoon.
Totally. They think the ultimate goal is dying, escaping your gross physical body, and floating as a translucent ghost on a cloud playing a harp forever.
But this source says that entire concept is a profound misreading of the text.
The end of the story is a renewed physical cosmos. It's not an escape pod leaving a doomed, burning planet.
It is a massive divine restoration project of the planet itself. We get bodies back. We get the dirt back.
I love that. The symmetry of the timeline is just breathtaking when you step back and look at it.
It really is. The one who hovered over the void and said, "Let there be light," at the absolute beginning is the exact same one who says, "Behold, I am making all things new," at the very end.
The Creator's spoken command governs the ultimate future just as absolutely as it governed the ancient past.
The entire span of human history is bracketed by the generative voice of God.
Okay, so we have traveled from eternity past to eternity future. We've unpacked Christological architecture, the mechanics of divine speech.
The grand sweep of biblical history.
But I want to land the plane right in the listener's lap. What does this mean for a regular Tuesday?
Right.
Because high-level theology is great, but if it doesn't change how I interact with my reality today, it's just academic trivia.
Well, Velazquez actually provides some very clear, practical anchors for how this doctrine collides with the real world.
Let's get into those. He starts by addressing how we even read the book of Genesis today, right?
Yes. He issues a strong warning against reducing the creation account to a mere mechanical or scientific textbook.
Yeah, treating Genesis solely as ammunition for modern scientific debates. Now, to be clear, Velazquez impartially acknowledges that those debates about timelines and physics do exist.
And they matter to people trying to reconcile faith and science?
Yeah. But he argues that if you flatten the text of Genesis down into nothing but a technical dispute about the exact mechanics of origins, you miss the forest for the trees.
You completely miss the profound theological revelation of who God actually is.
And the unshakable order he established.
And the incredible human vocation we've been handed within that order. The text is doing far more heavy lifting than just providing a scientific timeline.
It's providing a comprehensive lens for all of reality.
Exactly. And Velazquez notes that this lens directly impacts the daily life of the church, specifically regarding ministry and discipleship.
Right.
He points out that the entire function of the church relies completely on the continuing power of divine speech.
When a pastor preaches or a friend shares the gospel, it isn't just an attempt to give a persuasive TED Talk.
It matters because words, specifically the words of the Creator, are the only mechanism that can call the spiritually dead back to life.
Velazquez describes the process of discipleship as a re-education in reality.
I love that phrasing so much.
It's brilliant because we are constantly bombarded by the noise of the world telling us what is true.
Culture tells us what to do with our bodies.
How to define our work, how to express our sexuality, how to cope with our suffering.
Discipleship is the deliberate daily choice to relearn the truth about all those physical things by choosing to listen to the Creator's generative word over the descriptive noise of the culture.
And that reality of competing voices is why his point about suffering is perhaps the most poignant practical implication in the entire article.
I completely agree. When a person is deeply suffering, when life feels wildly chaotic and you are drowning in the depths of that exile experience,
the doctrine of creation by command is not just abstract theology.
it is an anchor of immense hope.
Because when you're in the dark and everything is falling apart, you need to know who is actually in control of the dark.
Precisely. Velazquez argues that the same voice that sovereignly ruled the absolute, terrifying darkness of the primordial void at the beginning of time is the exact same voice that is ruling human history and your personal history right now.
The chaos does not intimidate the Creator.
No, I think that is the core of what Velazquez calls the feeling of holy astonishment.
If God is still actively speaking, and his generative voice truly governs the timeline, then the chaos you're experiencing today, the medical diagnosis, the financial ruin, the profound uncertainty, is not the final word.
The final word belongs exclusively to the one who speaks life.
Wow. And that ultimate authority provides the framework for the evangelistic angle the text brings up too.
Yes. In the context of a spoken universe, evangelism is radically redefined.
It's not a cheap self-improvement pitch.
It's not a marketing campaign offering to add a little Jesus to your life so you can be 10% happier.
No. Velazquez frames it as a profound, urgent summons back to the Creator.
It is reminding a person that every single breath they take and every beat of their heart is a derivative gift from the one who spoke them into existence.
And that they will ultimately answer to that voice.
Exactly.
So to pull all of these massive threads together and recap the incredible journey this source material has taken us on. The universe you live in is not a violent accident.
It is not the byproduct of an ancient cosmic war.
It is a spoken reality, It is intricately ordered, held together by the eternal Son, and it is inherently fundamentally good.
The effortless voice that hovered over the void and said, "Let there be light," didn't just speak once and fade into the background.
That voice echoes through the entire 12-stage biblical narrative. It sustains the physical world, it speaks dead hearts back to life, it binds itself to broken humanity through covenant.
And it will ultimately culminate in the unbreakable promise to transfigure this earth and make all things new.
As you go about the rest of your day, I highly encourage you to intentionally test this paradigm.
Step outside. Look up at the architecture of the sky, or just look closely at the dirt beneath your feet.
Remind yourself that what you are looking at is dependent existence.
It does not have the power to exist on its own. It is being sustained right now in this exact millisecond by the generative speech of a perfectly free creator.
And as you look at that spoken world, I want to leave you with one final thought to wrestle with. It's a tension deeply implied by the mechanics we've unpacked today.
If this entire physical universe was generated solely by the power of God's spoken word, and you, as the text of Genesis insists, are uniquely made in the image of that exact same God, what does that mean for the creative or the destructive power of the words that you choose to speak into the lives of the people around you today?